Departing Salt Lake City, Twain notes, the remnant and ruin of what had been an important military station, Camp Floyd. He continued his narrative, 90 to 100 miles from Salt Lake, possibly between Fairview and Sand Springs Station. And now we entered upon one of that species of deserts whose concentrated hideousness shames the diffused and diluted horrors of Sahara, an alkali desert. Burton, on the other hand, is quite verbose about his journey. He spent about 1 week at Camp Floyd before it was deserted, and then ran to Meadow Creek, or Faust Station. In 1858, General A.S. Johnston and his troops established a fort near Fairfield, named it for John B. Floyd, Secretary of War. Troops stayed at Camp Floyd till early in the Civil War, when they headed east to join the fighting. After Secretary of War Floyd joined the Confederacy, Union officials renamed the Utah garrison Fort Crittenden. Identified as Camp Floyd in the 1861 mail contract, this station had various other names, including Fairfield, Fort Crittenden, and Carson's Inn, and Cedar City. The settlement of Fairfield began in Cedar Valley in 1858 when John Carson, John Williams, William Beardsall, John Clegg, and others built homes and a protective enclosure called Cedar City Fort. John Carson built an adobe inn that same year, which served as a station for both Pony Express riders and stage lines. Departing Camp Floyd, Burton writes, about 4 p.m. as we mounted, a furious dust storm broke over the plain. Perhaps it may account for our night's reprise, which a censorious reader might attribute to our copious libations of whiskey. The road to the first mail station, Meadow Creek, lay over a sage barren. We lost no time in missing it by forging to the west. After hopelessly driving about the country till 10 p.m. in the fine, cool night, we knocked at a hut and induced the owner to appear. He was a Dane who spoke little English, and his son, scared by our fierceness, began at once to boo-hoo. At last, however, we were guided by our foreloper to Johnston's settlement in Rock Valley, and we entered by the unceremonious process of pulling down the zigzag fences. After some trouble, we persuaded a Mormon to quit the bed in which his wife and children lay, and shake down for us sleeping places among the cats and hens on the floor, and to provide our animals with oats and hay. Mr. Grease, the marshal, one of the handiest of men, who during his volunteer service in Mexico had learned most things from carrying a musket to cooking a steak, was kind enough to prepare our supper, after which, still sorely laden with whiskey dying within us, we turned in. We rose with the dawn, the cats and the hens, sleep being impossible after the first blush of light, and I proceeded to inspect the settlement. The settlement consisted of half a dozen huts, which swarmed, however, with women and children. Mr. Kennedy introduced us to a Scotch widow of mature years, who gave us any amount of butter and buttermilk in exchange for a little tea. She was but a lukewarm Mormon, declaring polygamy to be an abomination, complaining that she had been inveigled to a mean place, and that the poor in Mormondon were exceedingly poor. Yet the canny body was stout and fresh, her house was clean and neat, and she washed her children and her potatoes. We had wandered 25 miles out of the right road and were still distant 15 to 16 from the first mail station. For the use of the floor, flies, and permission to boil water, we paid our taciturn Mormon $2, and at noon, a little before the bursting of the dusty storm gusts, which reproduced the horrors of Cindy, we found ourselves once more in the saddle and the ambulance. We passed by a cattle track on rolling ground, dotted with sage and greasewood, which sheltered hosts of jackass rabbits, and the Seago with its beautiful lily-like flowers. After crossing sundry nullahs and pitch-holes with deep and rugged sides, we made the mail station at the west end of Rush Valley, which is about 20 miles distance from Camp Floyd. The little green bottom with its rush-bordered sinking spring is called by Captain Simpson Meadow Creek.